As it happened, it was the school Easter holidays, and Chloe, her teenage daughter, was visiting her father, Bridget's ex-husband Ben, in London. Jonathan, Bridget's boyfriend, was away in New York on business. Was boyfriend the right word to use when she was in her late 30s? She had turned 39 the previous month, but was still in a state of denial. And Jonathan already in his 40s. It was Chloe who now had a boyfriend. Yet another state of affairs that Bridget was still trying to get used to. As for Jonathan, friend didn't convey the true nature of his relationship to Bridget, and partner suggested some kind of professional acquaintance. Romantic partner sounded altogether too pretentious. If Bridget had been more daring, she might have referred to Jonathan as her lover, but that would have made her sound like a character from a cheesy romantic novel. She would just have to stick with boyfriend and try not to look embarrassed whenever she said it. "Plans, D.I. Hart? Pressed Grayson, and Bridget realised that her thoughts were wandering. She had fully intended to spend her evening alone, catching up with a box set on Netflix and finishing off a half-drunk bottle of Moscato and a slice of chocolate gâteau from the patisserie on Banbury Road. But she didn't think the chief super would regard that as a pressing engagement. No, sir, no plans at all. "I am assigning you to watch over her," said Grayson, and Bridget got the impression that his response would have been much the same whether she had answered yes or no. "The Deputy Commissioner thinks we should take this threat to her life seriously, and assign a couple of plainclothes officers to the task, at least until the literary festival is over." "Why would someone want to kill a writer?" Bridget asked. Diane Gilbert wasn't exactly a household name. At least Bridget hadn't heard of her before. Grayson drew his eyebrows together, nodding gently as if he had asked himself the same question. But he was clearly under pressure to carry out the wishes of his superiors. "Apparently her newly published book has attracted some controversy. I suggest that you familiarise yourself with its contents before the talk begins." "Yes, sir." Bridget had so little time to read these days that the prospect of burying her nose in some obscure academic's latest publication held little appeal. But attending the Oxford Literary Festival sounded like a better gig than many of the jobs she was required to do as DI. At least she would be indoors, in the gorgeous surroundings of the Divinity School, and hopefully very far from any likely criminal activity. She had considered going to the Literary Festival with Jonathan when the programme had been released earlier in the year. She'd almost booked tickets to go to the Sheldonian to see an award-winning best-selling author of historical fiction who had just published the long-awaited final instalment of her trilogy. But she'd been too busy at work, and when she finally got round to visiting the festival's website, all the tickets for that event had sold out. Now here she was, and although she was technically working, and the event wasn't one she would personally have chosen, the venue was very much to her taste. She would never tire of Oxford's glorious university buildings, and the Divinity School was surely one of the jewels in its crown. Now, with the last light quickly fading outside, she allowed her gaze to roam over its incredible ceiling. Gothic in style and 5 centuries old, it was a masterwork in stone. A mass of soaring arches, intricately interconnected swells and hanging pendants. The uplighters located round the edge of the hall accentuated its curved forms with light and shadow. Standing at her side, Bridget's detective sergeant, Jake Derwent, shifted his weight from one foot to another and clasped his big hands behind his back. Even Diane Gilbert, with her stick-insect legs and her stilettos, couldn't compete with Jake's 6'5" frame. Bridget had asked him to accompany her to the literary festival for no better reason than he was good company. Unlike her, Jake seemed genuinely to have had no plans for the evening, other than a beer, a curry, and a game of football on the telly, and they were now positioned together at the back of the hall. Standing head and shoulders above her, and with his thick ginger beard, the young sergeant had attracted a fair amount of attention, especially from the ladies in the audience. Diane Gilbert, too, had seemed slightly less dismissive of Jake than she had of Bridget, and the tips of the young sergeant's ears had turned a delicate shade of salmon when she referred to him sarcastically as her handsome protector. Nearby, a table piled high with glossy hardback editions of Diane Gilbert's book was being staffed by a team from Blackwell's bookshop, who were obviously hoping to sell a large number of copies to the festival-goers. Bridget wondered whether